I always thought I had it all. A successful business, a beautiful home, and a marriage that seemed perfect from the outside. Karina, my wife of 15 years, was everything I could have asked for. Beautiful, intelligent, strong-willed. She was the center of my life, the one person I trusted more than anyone else. We had built everything together, from scratch. I thought we were untouchable. That was until today. I woke up earlier than usual. The room was still dark, the only sound coming from the faint hum of the air conditioner. The usual morning quiet, the kind that felt almost too still. Something about it didn't sit right with me. I couldn't explain it at first, but there was this unease gnawing at my stomach. I rolled over to look at Karina, but the spot beside me was cold. She wasn't there. I glanced at the clock, it was 6:30 a.m. She was usually up by now. I waited a moment, thinking maybe she was just making coffee in the kitchen, or perhaps she had gone for a run like she did on occasion. But this feeling, this creeping feeling that something was off, wouldn't leave. I tossed the covers off and swung my legs over the side of the bed. The floor was cold under my feet as I stood up. The silence in the house felt oppressive, almost as if it was waiting for something to break it. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, checking the time again. No messages, no missed calls. I walked out of the bedroom, heading toward the kitchen. The house was dark, not a single light on. There was no sign of her. I pushed open the kitchen door and looked around. The coffee machine was off, the kitchen still, almost untouched. "Karina?" I called out. My voice echoed back to me. No response. I was starting to get nervous now. Something wasn't right. She wasn't answering her phone. The house, the whole damn house, felt empty. I walked through the house slowly, calling her name, getting no answer. The anxiety crept up my spine, turning into something heavier, something that gnawed at me. I checked the guest room, the office, and even the bathroom. Nothing. No sign of her. That's when I noticed it. On the kitchen counter, beside the empty coffee mug, her phone was lying there. The screen was lit up. I don't know why, but I picked it up. Maybe it was the nagging feeling inside me telling me I wasn't getting the full picture. I unlocked her phone. I had no reason to suspect anything. We'd never had any real issues, nothing worth mentioning. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but whose is? But as the phone opened, I saw the first message, a string of words that hit me like a punch to the stomach. "You know I'm waiting for you. I can't take it anymore. Only you." My heart skipped a beat. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the screen, my fingers frozen on the edges of the phone. There was no mistaking it. That wasn't a message from a friend. My eyes scanned the rest of the conversation. The sender's name wasn't familiar. I clicked on the thread and began to read, the words blurring together. More messages, each one more intimate than the last. "I miss you, I can't stop thinking about you, you make me feel alive again." I felt sick. Everything inside me screamed that I shouldn't be reading this. This wasn't just a mistake, this wasn't some kind of mix-up. I felt the bile rise in my throat as I read on. There were no doubts left. Karina, the woman I trusted more than anyone, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was having an affair. With my best friend, James. It felt like a punch in the gut. My chest tightened as I scanned the screen in disbelief. James, my closest confidant, the guy I shared everything with, had been sleeping with my wife. The man I trusted, the man I thought would never do something like this, had been right under my nose the whole time. My mind raced, and for a moment, I couldn't even process it. The messages between them went on, filled with promises, plans. They were meeting. They were making plans to see each other again. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the phone down onto the kitchen counter, my hand trembling. I stood there, breathless, staring at the phone. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. How could she do this? How could they both do this to me? All these years of marriage, the trust, the loyalty, all of it had been a lie. I had to act. I couldn't just sit here and let this happen. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I couldn't let it go. I needed to confront her, to figure out how far this went. I needed answers. My mind was spinning as I grabbed my jacket off the coat rack. There was no time to waste. Karina had to be somewhere. I wasn't going to just let her walk away from this. And James? He was going to regret what he'd done. I stepped outside, the cold air hitting my face as I walked down the driveway. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay in that house. The weight of what I had just discovered was too much. I didn't have a plan. But I knew I had to find them. I had to confront them. They needed to understand the consequences of their actions. There was no going back. There was no fixing this. This was the end of everything I had known. But it was also the beginning of something new. I could feel the anger rising in my chest, a fire that had been smoldering inside of me for years. Karina had taken something from me. And I was going to take it back. It wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about control. About justice. I would make them both understand that they couldn't hurt me without consequences. And once I figured out how I was going to make them pay, I would make them regret every second of this. I couldn't let this slide. I wouldn't. And as the cold wind blew against my face, I realized that the course of my life had just changed. Forever. I walked out to my car, my fingers gripping the keys tightly. The morning light was breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across the empty streets. I didn't have a destination in mind, but I knew I had to find them. Somewhere, they were together, and I would make sure they understood what they had done. I started the engine, the roar of the car cutting through the silence. I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind swirling with thoughts. What would I say? How would I confront them? I didn't want to do anything rash, but at the same time, I knew that this was going to be a turning point in my life. There was no going back after this. I drove for another 20 minutes before the idea hit me. I hadn't seen James at the office for the past few days, and Karina had been vague about where she'd been late last night. Maybe I could catch them at his place. I knew where he lived, of course, just a few miles away, tucked into a quiet neighborhood at the edge of the city. The thought of confronting them both there sent a wave of cold fury through me. It would be so easy to just march in, demand answers, and let the chips fall where they may. But something held me back. I wasn't sure if I was ready for that confrontation just yet. I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear her explanation, or worse, the lies that would follow. I pulled up to James' house and parked down the street, keeping a safe distance. I could see his car in the driveway. He was home. For a few moments, I just sat there, my hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house. Everything around me seemed oddly still. The world felt so normal, so oblivious to what was happening behind closed doors. It was surreal. How could everything look so ordinary while my whole world was crumbling? I took a deep breath and got out of the car. My heart was pounding. I wasn't sure if I was going to walk up to that door or turn around and leave. But something inside me told me I couldn't just walk away. Not after what I had found. I moved slowly, my footsteps heavy on the pavement. I reached the front door and hesitated, my hand raised to knock. But before I could make a sound, I heard voices from inside. The door was ajar, and I could hear the unmistakable sound of laughter, James' laugh, that too familiar sound that used to comfort me but now made my skin crawl. I leaned closer to the door, straining to hear more. I caught snippets of their conversation, Karina's voice cutting through the air, too soft to make out the words. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold. "I can't wait for tonight," Karina said, her voice low but clear. "It'll be just like before." The thrill. The secrecy. It hit me like a sledgehammer. The betrayal wasn't just an isolated mistake, it was an ongoing affair. They had been planning it, together, for months. And I had been living in the dark, believing I was in control, believing everything was fine. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. I turned on my heel and walked back to my car, my head spinning. The rage, the disgust, everything I had felt earlier, now felt even more intense, more suffocating. I knew I wasn't ready for that confrontation, not yet. But I was ready to make my move. I couldn't just stand by and let this go. I sped down the street, my thoughts racing faster than the car. I couldn't let them get away with this. I wouldn't let them destroy everything I had built. Not without consequences. I didn't care about the details right now. I didn't care about the how or the why. All I knew was that I needed to act. This was just the beginning. I had a plan in mind now, one that would make both of them regret ever crossing me. And no matter what it took, no matter how far I had to go, I would make them both pay. The game had changed, and I was going to win. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation I overheard. Karina's voice echoed in my mind, the thrill. The secrecy. It was clear that this wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. They had been sneaking around behind my back for a while now, and every word they exchanged added fuel to the fire inside me. I had been driving for over an hour, letting my mind wander through the possibilities. The rage was still there, but now there was something else, something sharper, clarity. This wasn't about saving my marriage anymore. It was about something much bigger. It was about showing them that I was not the man they could walk all over. This was about revenge. I parked my car at the edge of town, just far enough to avoid anyone seeing me. I needed time to think, to plan. I wasn't going to walk in there and start yelling or throwing things. No. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I was going to play it smart, calm, calculated. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. James' number was right there. My finger hovered over the screen for a moment before I decided not to call. Not yet. There would be time for that later. Instead, I scrolled further, looking for someone else, someone who could help me get what I needed. I made the call. James, I said, when the voice on the other end picked up. We need to talk. The line was silent for a beat, but then his voice came through, as smooth as ever. Mike? What's up? It's early. I know, I said, keeping my voice steady. But we need to talk. I'm on my way over. He sounded confused, but there was no hesitation in his voice. Sure. What's this about? You'll see when I get there, I said, hanging up before he could say anything else. I wasn't sure if he knew what was coming, but I wasn't about to give him the chance to prepare for it. I was going to hit him with everything, all at once. It wasn't long before I pulled up to his place. I took a deep breath before stepping out of the car. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. James was never one for subtlety. He liked to be out there, loud and proud, but today it was as if he knew something was about to change. I rang the doorbell. No response. I rang it again. Still nothing. Frustrated, I turned the knob. It wasn't locked. I pushed the door open slowly, the creak of the hinges loud in the silence. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. James. I called out. My voice was calm, controlled, but inside, my heart was racing. I needed him to know that I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going anywhere until I had answers. I walked into the living room, where I found him sitting on the couch, his phone in his hands. He looked up when he saw me, his eyes widening in surprise. Mike? He stood up, his posture stiff. What are you doing here? I think you know exactly why I'm here, I said, my voice low. I wasn't angry, not yet. But I could feel the anger building inside me, and I knew it wasn't going to take much for it to spill over. James hesitated, glancing away. His expression changed, just for a moment, guilt, maybe. But it was gone before I could be sure. "Look, Mike," he began, his voice faltering. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just what?" I cut him off, stepping closer. "It just happened. You've been lying to me for months. You've been sleeping with my wife behind my back, and you want to tell me it just happened?" He didn't say anything, his face flushed with embarrassment. But that wasn't enough. I needed him to understand. I needed him to know that there would be consequences. "I should have never trusted you," I continued, my voice steady. "You've been sneaking around, ruining everything I've worked for. I'm not going to let you get away with it." His eyes darted to the door, and I knew he was trying to figure out how to get out of this. But it was too late for him to run. I wasn't letting him off the hook. "I'm not going to yell," I said, taking a step back. "I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of seeing me lose it. But I'm going to make sure you understand what happens when you cross me." James swallowed hard. "Mike, please." "No," I interrupted. "You don't get to say anything. Not anymore." I turned away from him and started pacing, every muscle in my body tense with the anger that was now spilling over. I wasn't just angry at James, I was angry at myself for letting it get this far. I was angry at Karina for betraying me. But more than anything, I was angry at how helpless I had felt for so long. That was about to change. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, finally turning to face him again. "You're going to sit here, and you're going to think about what you've done. And then, when I'm done with you, I'm going to make sure Karina knows everything. You're going to lose everything. Your job, your reputation. And if you think I'm bluffing, just keep watching. You'll see." I could see the fear in his eyes now. It wasn't enough. Not yet. But it would be. "I'm giving you one chance to fix this," I added, my voice cold. "Tell me what I need to know. Now." James opened his mouth to speak, but then he closed it again. His hesitation said it all. He knew it was over. It was only just beginning. James was silent for a long moment, and I could see him trying to weigh his options. I knew he wasn't stupid, he'd been in this game long enough to know when he was outmatched. But what he didn't understand was that I wasn't giving him a choice. Not anymore. "You think I'll just sit here and let you destroy my life?" James finally spoke, his voice shaky, but he was trying to hold on to some semblance of control. "You've got it all wrong, Mike. I never meant for it to go this far." I stood there, arms crossed, watching him squirm. He was doing exactly what I expected, playing the victim. Trying to manipulate the situation, make it seem like he was the one being cornered. It was pathetic. "No," I said, my voice flat. "You're not a victim here, James. You made a choice. You made it over and over again. Every time you and Karina decided to sneak around behind my back. Every time you met up, kissed, laughed at my expense, you made a choice. And now it's time to pay the price." I took a step toward him, and he flinched, instinctively backing up. I saw the fear in his eyes, the realization that he was no longer the confident, in-control guy I used to know. He was in my territory now. "Look, Mike," he said, swallowing hard. "I never wanted to hurt you. You know how much I care about you. But Karina, she's different." "Stop," I interrupted. "Don't you dare try to blame her. This is all on you, James. You're the one who took advantage of our friendship. You're the one who betrayed me. And now you want me to feel sorry for you?" He didn't respond. He couldn't. There was nothing left to say. The silence stretched on between us. The walls seemed to close in, the weight of the betrayal hanging heavily in the air. I could feel my anger simmering just beneath the surface, but I wasn't going to let it boil over yet. No, I had something much bigger planned. I turned my back to him, walking toward the window. The view was familiar, comforting, but now it felt foreign. This house, this life, everything had been built on lies. The life I thought I knew had been nothing more than a facade, crumbling with every passing second. "James," I said, my voice calm now. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm not going to go to the police. I'm not going to ruin your career, not yet. But I will ruin your reputation. I'll expose you for who you really are. To your friends, to your colleagues, to anyone who will listen. They won't look at you the same way ever again." His eyes widened. "Mike, please, don't do this. I'll do anything. Just don't destroy me. I've worked too hard for everything." I turned around to face him. "You should have thought about that before you started sleeping with my wife. You should have thought about that before you decided to play with fire. Now, you're going to burn." There was no pity in my voice, no remorse. I didn't care about his pleas. His life, his career, it didn't matter to me anymore. I had been so consumed with the idea of revenge that nothing else mattered. He had crossed a line, and I was going to make sure he regretted it. I walked toward the door. Before I left, I turned to look at him one last time. "You have 24 hours, I said coldly. You're going to tell Karina everything. You're going to admit to her that this whole thing, the affair, was your fault. Not hers. You'll tell her you're done. That it's over. If you don't, I will. I'll make sure she knows everything." James stared at me, his face a mixture of disbelief and fear. But I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned and left, slamming the door behind me with a finality that left no room for negotiation. The car ride back home was a blur. I didn't know what I was feeling, satisfaction, anger, or maybe just emptiness. This was supposed to make me feel better, wasn't it? Taking control of the situation, turning the tables. But as I parked in my driveway, I felt the weight of what I had just done. I wasn't sure where to go from here. Confronting James had been step one, but now I had to deal with Karina. I had to make her understand what had happened, what she had done. She needed to feel the consequences of her actions, just like he did. I walked inside the house, the silence welcoming me like an old friend. Karina wasn't home yet. I knew she'd be back soon. The timing was everything. I had to make sure I was ready. I couldn't help but wonder what she would say when I told her I knew everything. What would her excuse be? Would she try to apologize, or would she try to justify what she'd done? The thought of her trying to lie to my face made my blood boil. But I couldn't let that happen. Not this time. I sat on the couch, my thoughts racing. The moment she walked through that door, I would be ready. I would make sure she understood that everything had changed. Nothing would ever be the same again. The game had already started, and I wasn't going to lose. I wouldn't let them both get away with this. This was just the beginning. The evening felt heavier than it should. Karina would be home soon, and I could already hear the distant hum of her car as it approached the driveway. My body tensed, anticipation flooding my veins. There would be no turning back after this. The truth was out there now, and there was no more pretending. I was no longer the man she thought I was, and she wasn't the woman I thought I knew. I sat on the couch, my eyes fixed on the door. My hands were clenched into fists, knuckles white. The plan was simple: confront her. Make her face what she'd done, make her understand the magnitude of her betrayal. There were no compromises, no apologies, no softening the blow. She had crossed a line, and I would make sure she felt the full weight of the consequences. I heard the sound of the door unlocking, and I braced myself. The door creaked open, and Karina stepped inside, her face lighting up as she saw me. "Mike, you're home early," she said, her voice warm, but there was something in her eyes that I couldn't place. She paused for a moment, her eyes scanning my face. Everything okay? I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My mouth felt dry, and for a moment, the room felt like it was spinning. I could feel the walls closing in, but I had to stay calm. I had to control this. I had to make her understand. Sit down, I said, my voice firm. She hesitated but followed my command, sitting on the couch next to me. I could see the confusion on her face, the way she nervously tugged at her sleeve, but I wasn't here to explain myself. I turned to face her, keeping my expression unreadable. I know everything, I said flatly. Her face immediately drained of color. For the first time, I saw something other than the usual calm facade. A flicker of panic. Her eyes darted around the room, and for a split second, she seemed to hesitate, like she was trying to figure out how to get out of this. What do you mean, Mike? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady, but there was a tremor in it. It was the first real crack in her armor. I know about you and James, I said, my voice low but steady. I know everything. The texts, the late nights, the lies. I know it all. Karina's face twisted with disbelief, and for a moment, she said nothing. The silence between us felt suffocating. I could see her mind racing, trying to process what was happening, but there was no way out for her. How long? I pressed, leaning forward. How long have you been sleeping with him behind my back? She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. I could see the guilt written all over her face. The perfect mask was gone now, and all that was left was the truth. Karina, I said, my voice sharp now, cutting through the silence. How long? How long have you been doing this to me? She hesitated again, but finally, she looked up at me. The shame in her eyes was almost palpable. It started a few months ago, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't plan it. But things between us changed, Mike. Changed? I repeated, the bitterness rising in my chest. Things changed. You decided to betray me with my best friend, and now you want to talk about change. She shook her head, her eyes welling up with tears. I never wanted to hurt you, Mike. I don't know. Things weren't the same anymore. I felt neglected, like I was invisible. And James understood me. He listened to me when you didn't. I made a mistake, and I know it's no excuse, but what? I interrupted, my voice rising. You thought it was okay to throw everything away? To destroy everything we've built? You thought it was fine to do this behind my back, like I wouldn't find out? Karina's face crumpled, and the tears spilled over. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant for any of this to happen. I stood up suddenly, walking away from her. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't stand the sight of her tears, the way she tried to justify everything she had done. The anger was rising in me again, but this time, I knew I couldn't let it control me. Not yet. I paced the room, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. This wasn't how I thought this would go. I had expected anger, accusations, maybe even some form of resistance. But this? This was worse than anything I could have imagined. The guilt, the shame, the realization that the woman I had trusted for so long had been lying to me. Mike, Karina's voice was small, almost pleading. Please, let me explain. I never wanted to hurt you, but... Stop, I cut her off, turning to face her again. You don't get to explain yourself anymore. This is bigger than just hurt. You destroyed everything, Karina. And now, you have to live with that. I could see the fear in her eyes now, the realization that there was no escaping the consequences. But I wasn't done yet. No, I wasn't going to just let her get away with it. I'm not going to yell at you, I said quietly. I'm not going to beg you to stay. I'm not even going to try and fix this. But here's what I'm going to do. You're going to end things with James. Right now. No more lies. No more excuses. You're going to tell him you're done. Her lips trembled as she nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what I was saying. I will, she whispered. I will. I'll tell him it's over. Good, I said, my voice cold and distant. And if you don't? If I find out you've lied to me again, I'll make sure you lose everything. I'll make sure he loses everything. You'll regret this, Karina. I promise you that. She didn't speak after that. She just nodded, her face pale as she sat there, staring at the floor. I didn't have the energy to say anything else. The truth had come out, but it didn't bring any relief. It just felt like the beginning of something much darker. The revenge was only getting started. I walked out of the room, the silence pressing down on me. The ball was in her court now, but I knew one thing for sure, nothing would ever be the same. The next few days felt like a fog. I went through the motions of daily life, but everything seemed to blur together. Work, home, sleep, it was all mechanical, just a routine I had to follow. Karina was still there, in the house, but we barely spoke. I couldn't bring myself to look at her without feeling a wave of disgust. She had ruined everything, and no amount of words could undo what had been done. I didn't hear from James after the confrontation. Part of me was hoping he'd come running, begging for forgiveness. But I knew better. He wouldn't. Men like him don't apologize for their actions, especially not when they think they've won. The fact that he had been so eager to jump into bed with my wife showed me how little he cared about me. The phone call came late that evening. It was Karina. I've done it, she said, her voice shaky. I ended it with him. It's over. I leaned back in the chair, gripping the phone tightly. I wasn't sure if I was relieved or angrier. Good, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I want it to stay that way. No more secrets. No more lies. I'm so sorry, Mike, she whispered. I've ruined everything. I know that. But I need you to understand. I understand, I cut her off. You betrayed me. You broke my trust. And nothing you say can change that. There was silence on the other end, and for a moment, I wondered if she was crying. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't going to be her shoulder to cry on. I had already given her too much. I just want things to go back to normal, she said, her voice cracking. I want us to be okay again. You think things can just go back to normal? I asked, my voice rising. You think I can just forget everything? You've ruined this, Karina. You've ruined us. I don't know if I can even look at you the same way anymore. I know, she whispered. I know. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. The anger that had been building inside me for days felt like it was finally boiling over. But I wasn't going to give in. I wasn't going to fall for the same lies. This was the price she had to pay. I want you to leave, I said, my voice cold. Now. Pack your things and go. I can't do this anymore. There was a long pause before she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Mike, please don't do this. I felt my blood boil, but I stayed calm. No more. I've had enough. I want you out of my life, Karina. You don't get to stay here after what you've done. She didn't say anything after that. She just hung up. And that was it. The last thread of hope I had for fixing things was gone. There would be no more conversations, no more chances. Karina had chosen her path, and now she had to walk it alone. I spent the next few hours pacing the house. I couldn't sit still. The realization of what I had just done was slowly starting to hit me. I had kicked her out. My wife. The woman I thought I would grow old with. But I knew it was the right decision. She had crossed a line I couldn't forgive, and I wasn't going to pretend it didn't hurt. It did. But it wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about taking control back. It was about showing her, and myself, that I wouldn't let anyone walk all over me again. Later that night, I went to my office and started making plans. The next phase of my revenge was already in motion. I wasn't going to stop now. There was no going back. The first thing on my list was James. I still had a score to settle with him. And I wasn't going to let him get away with it. He had hurt me, but he had hurt Karina too. He had taken advantage of my trust, and I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. I called his office the next morning. The receptionist answered, and I asked to speak to him. She put me on hold, and I could feel the tension building inside me. Mr. James Carter is unavailable at the moment, the receptionist said when she returned to the line. Would you like to leave a message? No, I said, my voice low. I'll speak to him in person. I hung up the phone and grabbed my jacket. It was time to pay James a visit. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I didn't need to have all the answers. What mattered now was making him understand that there were consequences to his actions. He needed to know that he couldn't get away with this. I drove to his office, the entire time thinking about what I would say to him, how I would make him see the damage he had done. He would have to face the consequences of his choices, just like Karina had. But I wasn't just doing this for her. I was doing this for me. When I arrived, I parked in front of the building and took a moment to steady my breathing. I had no intention of backing down. I wasn't the victim here, I was the one in control now. And I was going to make sure James knew it. I walked into the lobby, my steps purposeful, and the receptionist directed me to his office. I didn't knock. I didn't wait for permission. I opened the door, and there he was, sitting at his desk, looking up in surprise. Mike, he said, standing up. What's going on? You look. I'm not here to chat, James, I cut him off, my voice cold. We need to talk. He paused, his expression shifting to one of unease. He knew what was coming. But I wasn't interested in his excuses. Not anymore. You've been playing games with me for too long, I said, stepping closer to his desk. And I'm done. I'm done being the guy you think you can walk all over. James opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't let him. You're going to lose everything. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. I'm going to expose you for who you really are. His face went pale. He knew I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't going to let him off the hook this time. Mike, please, he began, his voice faltering. I never meant to hurt you. You've already done the damage, James, I said, cutting him off once again. Now you'll pay the price. This was far from over. And I wasn't stopping until I had what I wanted. James was shaking now. His earlier arrogance had disappeared, replaced by an uncomfortable fear that was clear in the way his hands gripped the edge of his desk. The facade of the confident man I once called my friend was completely gone. He was just another man facing the consequences of his actions, and I wasn't going to show him mercy. I leaned forward, my eyes never leaving his. You think I'm done? I asked, my voice calm but heavy with intent. This is just the beginning. I'm going to ruin everything you've built. You won't be able to hide from the truth. His face paled even more, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But that was the last thing I needed right now. I had to stay focused. I wasn't here to feel sorry for James. I wasn't here to listen to his excuses. He took a step back, trying to find his balance, his usual composure shattered. Mike, I swear, he began, but I wasn't having it. No more lies, James, I interrupted sharply. You've had your chance. You had your fun, and now you'll pay the price. I could see the panic building in his eyes. He was a man who had been used to getting away with things, and for the first time in a long while, he realized that he was no longer in control. That realization was satisfying, but it wasn't enough. I had to make sure he understood that he wouldn't be able to walk away from this unscathed. I've already set the wheels in motion, I said, taking a step toward him. Your dirty little secret is about to be exposed. Everyone you've ever worked with, your clients, your friends, they'll all know what kind of person you really are. You'll be the joke, James. The guy who lost everything because he couldn't keep it in his pants. I could see him scrambling in his mind, trying to think of a way out, but there was no escape. I had him right where I wanted him. Please, he said, his voice almost pleading. Mike, let's talk about this. We can work something out. But I wasn't interested in negotiating. Not anymore. This wasn't a conversation. It was a reckoning. You don't get to talk your way out of this, I said coldly. This is beyond saving. You don't get to fix it by throwing money at it or begging for forgiveness. I'm taking everything from you, and you're going to live with that for the rest of your life. James opened his mouth again, but I held up a hand to silence him. I wasn't done yet. I had one last move to make. You think this is bad? Wait until you see what's coming next. I'm going to make sure that everyone you know sees you for what you really are, a liar, a cheat, and a coward. And once you're exposed, once they all know what you've done, you'll be left with nothing. No one will trust you. No one will respect you. His face was a mask of frustration and fear now, but it was too late for him to turn things around. The damage had already been done, and the consequences were in motion. I took a step back, my gaze never leaving his. This is the price you pay for betraying me. For betraying everything we built. And I'm going to make sure you feel every second of it. With that, I turned and walked out of his office, leaving him standing there, defeated. I wasn't sure how long it would take for everything to unravel, but I knew one thing, it was going to hurt. And I wasn't going to stop until James had lost everything. When I got home, Karina was waiting. She hadn't left, not yet. I hadn't expected her to. I didn't think she'd just pack up and leave after everything that had happened. No, she was still holding on to something, hoping that maybe, just maybe, things could go back to normal. But there was no normal anymore. Not for us. Not after what she'd done. I walked into the living room and found her sitting on the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes were red, and I could see the effort she was putting into holding herself together. But I wasn't interested in comforting her. Not anymore. She looked up as I entered, her gaze searching my face for any hint of softness. But there was nothing. No forgiveness. No empathy. Only cold resolve. Mike, she started, but I didn't let her finish. I don't want to hear it, I said, my voice harsh. You've said enough. You've destroyed everything, Karina. And now you want me to just forget it? You want me to act like nothing happened? She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. She could see it in my eyes, the fury, the pain, the betrayal. But she didn't know how to fix it, because there was no fixing this. There was no going back. I can't do this anymore, I said quietly. I don't want you here. I don't want you in my life. Her face crumpled at my words, the tears falling freely now. Mike, please, she pleaded. Please don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake. Let me fix it. I shook my head. You don't get to fix it, Karina. Not after what you've done. You lost that right the moment you decided to sleep with James. She stood up then, taking a step toward me, but I held up a hand to stop her. Pack your things, I said, my voice steady. I want you out. Now. Her expression shifted from desperation to resignation. She knew there was no coming back from this. She could see it in my eyes. The trust was gone. The love was gone. And nothing she said could change that. "I'll go," she whispered, her voice small. "But Mike, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, tears streaming down her face. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel pity. I just felt empty. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I was left with. And now, all I could do was wait for the consequences to catch up with James. I knew it wasn't over yet. This was only the beginning. But I was ready. And I would make sure they both paid the price for what they had done. The days that followed were strange, a blur of tension and restless nights. Karina was gone. She packed her things quickly, hardly speaking as she moved her clothes, her personal items, out of the house. She didn't fight me. She didn't plead for forgiveness. She just left. The emptiness in the house felt suffocating, a constant reminder of everything that had fallen apart. I spent the first few days avoiding the place where I knew I should be, home. I couldn't bring myself to sit there, to stare at the empty space where Karina used to be. So, I stayed busy. I worked. I met with clients. I kept my mind occupied, but it didn't help. It was all just a distraction. The truth was, I felt more alone than ever. The person I had loved and trusted for years was now a stranger. And the worst part? She was gone, but she was still living rent-free in my head. I hadn't heard from James, and I wasn't sure if I was relieved or just anxious for the storm to hit. I knew he wasn't going to take this lying down. Men like him didn't just roll over and accept defeat. He had something coming, but I was still playing my hand carefully. The last thing I needed was for him to go on the offensive. He was dangerous in his own way, and I knew I had to be careful how I played this out. I walked into my office one morning and found an envelope on my desk. My heart skipped a beat as I noticed the handwriting. It was James. I stared at the envelope for a moment, my mind racing. What did he want now? I ripped it open, not caring about the paper. I needed to know what he had to say. It was short, to the point. "Mike. I can't say I'm sorry for what happened. I never expected you to forgive me. But I am sorry for how everything played out. You and I both know I was wrong, and I've lost everything that mattered to me because of it. I don't expect you to accept this, but I want to make things right. If you can find it in you to listen, I'm willing to meet. We can talk, man to man. I know I've lost your trust, but I'm asking for one last chance to make it right. James." I sat back in my chair, the letter in my hands, staring at it as if it held the answers to everything. He was asking for a chance. After everything? After everything he had done to me, to Karina, he was asking for one last chance to make it right? There was a part of me that almost laughed. But I didn't. I couldn't. This wasn't funny. This was real. I threw the letter on the desk and rubbed my face with my hands. I should have been relieved. He was reaching out. That meant he wasn't as confident as he had been before. But I wasn't. I was pissed. He thought he could just come back and make it all go away. That wasn't how this worked. I had to think about this. I wasn't going to make any rash decisions. But this was the last move he would ever get to make. If I met with him, if I gave him this one last chance, it would be on my terms. And I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. I dialed his number. I wasn't going to wait for him to contact me again. If he wanted to fix this, he was going to meet me where I wanted to meet. No more running around. "Mike," he answered, his voice cautious, almost like he wasn't sure I was going to pick up. "Meet me tomorrow," I said, cutting straight to the point. I want you at the park near my office. 10 a.m., don't be late. He was silent for a moment, and then I heard him take a deep breath. All right. I'll be there. I hung up before he could say anything else. I wasn't interested in small talk. There was no point in pretending this was anything but a confrontation. The next morning, I stood by the park bench, waiting for James. The sun was still low in the sky, casting long shadows across the path. I could hear the rustling of leaves in the wind, the distant chatter of early morning joggers. But the silence between me and what was about to happen felt deafening. I glanced at my watch. It was 9:57 a.m. I wasn't going to give him any extra time. He was already late. At exactly 10 a.m., I saw him approaching, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His face was drawn, his eyes sunken. He looked like a man who had just realized how far he had fallen. He stopped a few feet away from me, hesitating before speaking. "Mike," he started, his voice hoarse. "I didn't think I'd ever be here, standing in front of you after everything." I "Cut the crap, James," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "I'm not here to listen to your excuses. You don't get to apologize and think everything's okay now. It's too late for that." He nodded slowly, accepting my words without resistance. "I understand." "I don't care if you understand," I snapped. "You ruined everything, James. You ruined my life, you ruined Karina's life, and you've lost everything. You think I'm supposed to feel sorry for you?" "I don't expect you to feel sorry for me," he said quietly. "I know what I did, and I know I can't fix it. I just wanted to apologize. I wanted to own up to what I did, at least. For what it's worth." His words hung in the air, and for a second, I thought about everything he had taken from me. The trust. The respect. The years of friendship. It wasn't just about Karina. It was about everything he had destroyed with his selfishness. "I don't care about your apology," I said, shaking my head. "It's too late for that. But here's the deal, you're going to disappear. You're going to lay low, stay out of my life. I'm going to make sure that everyone knows what you did, and you'll never be able to show your face in this town again. You're going to disappear, and you're going to live with that. And if you don't, if you try to come back into my life or Karina's life, I'll make sure it's the biggest mistake you've ever made." James didn't argue. He just stood there, taking it all in, understanding what I was saying. "Understood," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll make sure you regret it," I added. "You'll pay for what you did, James. Not today, but soon enough." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there. This wasn't over yet. But it was a start. The following weeks felt like a slow march toward the inevitable. I didn't see Karina again after our confrontation, and I made sure to keep my distance. I wasn't going to let her back into my life just because she showed up at my door apologizing. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. But as much as I tried to ignore it, the silence in the house still felt too loud. It was like I was living in a shell, pretending everything was fine while the world around me crumbled. I threw myself into work, keeping busy to avoid the emptiness that seemed to follow me wherever I went. Then, one evening, I received an unexpected message. It was from Karina. I hadn't heard from her in weeks, and when I saw her name pop up on my screen, I felt a wave of frustration. I had no desire to engage with her, but something inside me knew this was far from over. She was about to do something that would either be the final nail in the coffin or the last chance to salvage whatever was left. I opened the message. "Mike. I've done everything you asked. I've stayed away. But I need you to know something, James isn't gone. He's back. And he's not letting this go. He's made it clear that he's not going to just disappear. He wants to fight for what we had, for everything we shared. I know you want to hurt him. I know you want revenge. But Mike, this isn't going to end the way you think. You've pushed him too far. I don't want to see you get hurt, too. I'm begging you, please, don't go after him. This is my mess to fix. Let me handle this. Please. Karina. I stared at the screen, my thoughts racing. James wasn't gone. After everything I had done, after the threats, after everything I'd put him through, he was back. I'd warned him. I'd given him a clear path to disappear and walk away from this unscathed, but it seemed he wasn't done. He didn't know when to quit. I felt a surge of anger, but it wasn't directed at Karina this time. It was all for James. He wasn't going to get away with this. Not after everything he had taken from me, from Karina. He had to know that I wasn't going to let him just waltz back into our lives. I didn't reply to Karina's message. She didn't need to know my next move. I had already decided what I was going to do. The game had shifted, and I wasn't about to let James rewrite the rules. The next day, I made a call. I wasn't about to go into this blind. I needed to make sure I had all the right tools, the right leverage, and the right plan. I couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. The person on the other end of the line was someone I knew well. A former associate, someone who could help me find out exactly where James was, what he was doing, and what his next move would be. I need your help, I said when he picked up. It's about James. I want to know everything. He hesitated for a moment before responding, his voice low. I figured it would be him. You know I can get you whatever you need. But this is going to cost you. You know the price. I don't care about the cost, I snapped. Just get it done. That evening, I received the information I had been waiting for. James was staying at a hotel on the outskirts of town. He hadn't left. He wasn't hiding. He was plotting. And I knew exactly what he was planning. He was waiting for the right moment to strike, to make his move. But he didn't know that I was already one step ahead. I wasn't going to give him that chance. I had already taken back control. Now, it was time to finish what I had started. I drove to the hotel, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The adrenaline coursing through my veins felt like fire. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the final confrontation. No more games. No more second chances. I parked a few blocks away, not wanting to make it obvious that I was here for him. I kept my eyes on the hotel, watching for any signs of movement, any sign that he was about to make his move. Then, I saw him. James stepped out of the hotel's front entrance, looking around cautiously. He had no idea I was here. He had no idea that everything was about to come crashing down on him. I waited until he was out of view before following him, staying far enough behind to not be seen. I wasn't going to make the mistake of confronting him in public. This had to be private, personal. He needed to understand that this wasn't just about a betrayal, it was about consequences. He turned down a side street, and I quickened my pace, staying just close enough to stay out of sight but close enough to make sure he couldn't escape. As I followed him, I could see the tension in his posture, the way he kept looking over his shoulder. He knew something was off. He didn't know who was watching him, but I could tell he felt it. He had no idea how close I was, how much control I had over this situation. Finally, I stepped out from the shadows, blocking his path. James froze when he saw me. His face turned pale as he tried to take a step back. "Mike," he said, his voice shaky. "What the hell are you doing here? You didn't think I'd let you just walk away, did you?" I said, my voice cold and hard. "I didn't do anything wrong," he protested, but there was fear in his voice now. "You're making a mistake." I shook my head. "No, James. I'm not making a mistake. You are." I took a step forward, narrowing the gap between us. "You should have disappeared like I told you to. You should have left. But now, it's too late. Now, I'm going to make sure you never come back. He stepped back again, his eyes frantic. Mike, please. I'll leave. I'll get out of town, I swear. But I wasn't listening anymore. He had already chosen his fate. There was no escaping this. You don't get to walk away from this, James, I said, my voice low, final. You should have thought about that before you crossed the line. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, realizing that he had lost. It was over. And as I walked away, I felt the weight of everything lifting off my shoulders. The revenge had been sweet, but it wasn't enough. What mattered now was that I was in control, and I had finally taken back everything that had been stolen from me. This was the end of the line. There was nothing more to fight for. Nothing left to lose. The game was over.